Hello, good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another case study from SafetyChain software. My name is Aaron Bolshaw. I'm the VP of Marketing here. And today we're going to talk with Fresca Mexican Foods about how they integrated quality and production systems to keep up with growth. These guys do 5 million plus tortillas a day. It's a fantastic story of not just the quantity, but they put a really good focus on quality as well. So just a little housekeeping to start us all off. Everyone can see us, can hear us. We can't see you, we can't hear you, but we do want to hear your questions. We're going to have you type those into your webinar console at the right, and we'll be getting to some questions towards the end of the presentation. And then, yeah, the link will be shared with everyone that does request who wants this, and the slides will also be shared. So we're going to take an informal conversational approach to this. I'm going to interrupt our guy a couple of times and ask him some added questions and so forth. But with that, I did want to introduce our presenter today. Adam Doolhoff is the VP of Research, Quality, and Innovation, which is a really, really cool title. If you think about how if you have a strong focus on quality, but also have a growing production line you have to oversee, this is a really, really interesting guy to chat with. Over 11 years of experience in process manufacturing, specialized in research and development, obviously, food processing, food safety and quality assurance, and held leadership and scientific positions at Domino's Pizza, ConAgra, Railcoop Frozen Bakery. So a lot of great stuff. Adam Doolhoff, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, our pleasure. We've been talking about this and putting this together for a little bit here, and I got really interested in when I started talking to you about sort of the benefits and impact, which we'll get to later on, but it really became clear to me that part of your stories, part of your success story for Fresca Mexican Foods is centered around a couple of things that weren't so software oriented. One of them, and we'll get into it, is this this cultural shift that you had to sort of oversee and you got to mold, if you will. And we'll get into that. And then, of course, that cultural shift led us to kind of talk about how these systems, underneath all of the work that we do on the production floor and making sure food safe quality is the uniting of these two often somewhat disparate silos in many organizations that we've talked with, that we work with, Adam. Production and quality don't necessarily like kind of work from the same page, do they?
No, a lot of times you get that challenge where you have this goal to get 5 million tortillas made in a day. And if you're looking at that metric alone, you might say, well, it's great, we got 5.5 million, but you have to account for that quality component. Otherwise, you're ultimately going to have those challenges and that headbutting, so to speak, between those different groups.
Yeah, you sure will, especially as things kind of go through rework, if they should go down that path. And there's a good story that you have later on. So, but to start us off, I think what I want to do is just kind of get into what we're going to walk through today with you. We're going to talk about some of the challenges, a little bit of that culture with you, Adam, then what that current state of affairs were when you came and started looking for some software solutions. What was important about the selection, some key points about the implementation and how that went for you all, and then also, of course, just the benefits and core impact to the business and its performance. So, and that's that's where we took a lot of time and we talked a lot about this, Adam, where what some of the challenges were just underlying, but what caused you when you started looking for solutions? What caused you to kind of look for a software solution? What was going on?
So when it came to Fresca, one thing that really stuck out to me as a positive was the heart and the passion that everybody across the organization had. But just as present was that lack of clarity around data, lack of accuracy around the data, and lack of timeliness as some of those key points that we had to really focus on with that 5.5 million tortilla goal. We sometimes didn't see all the pieces of that data, and that created tension between the various departments. Even though we all wanted to do the right thing, there were those inherent silos. And in some ways, those silos, even though it's a smaller company than places I've been in the past, were just as big or bigger than some of those large companies, even though there was more heart behind it.
Yeah, and so there were some improvement opportunities along this path, though. You knew that there were some things sticking out that you wanted to also grapple with, right? Nobody I know anyway, Adam, has walked into a position such as yours and it was squeaky clean. You just had to, practice maybe your golf game, right? What were some of these opportunities you saw?
So a big piece of it was around the specs. We had multiple systems. We had an ERP system, we had paper-based systems, we had some Excel things, and none of those specifications ultimately aligned up perfectly. Most of the truth was there, but there were components that were in conflict with each other, and that created even more distrust between the groups. A lot more conflict arose with that tension. And so that was a big piece of the system. And as I started digging into that, we started seeing that there were specs that were just obsolete, and person A had version 2, but person B had version 5. And so there wasn't a good communication process to make sure that those things were standardized. Adding to that, we had tried, as a company, started doing SPC data through normal checks and balances using a ruler on the line and then typing that down or writing it down into an Excel spreadsheet. And that's another component, because we were doing all these things by hand and working on these things so rudimentary, we ended up creating a large lag time in being able to take that data that was so important and transposing that into something that was relevant and usable at the time. And that obviously component pushed us into more of that standardization issues. We had 5 or 6 different points of truth for that data, and not even the same people were taking that data. So we were even doubling up on quality person doing this check, but a production person doing this check, and they're both looking at similar components and ultimately wasting some time because they were both doing the exact same thing. And we looked at all the time spent, and we were wasting at least 20 hours or more of just transposing data from either pieces of paper into an Excel sheet or an Excel sheet to a different Excel sheet to get some of that SPC components really functioning for us to understand what was going on. But the biggest thing that I saw with all of this was that there was that passion, that heart that I was talking about previously. And while everybody was having that tension and conflict between what the real truth was, ultimately everybody cared enough to have those difficult conversations and sometimes arguments as to what was actually happening and what we could really trust for that data.
Yeah, and you told me a story. You had to find out the source of truth. How did you go about doing that? You finally had to just say, okay, you had to question everybody's real true north. And what did you end up doing to find that the first spec data? What did you end up doing?
So we ended up actually talking to some customers and said, hey, look, I'm new here. So I had that new person card, which was really great. And I was able to say, hey, I'm new and I'm seeing some things that are, I don't think anything's totally crazy where we're gonna have to call a recall or anything like that. But I have one spec that says that the diameter should be 9 inches to 10 inches, but another spec says it should be 9 1/4 to 10 1/4. What are you guys expecting? What do you have going on at your end of the whole process that we can help you out so that we don't have these conflicts of errors on our end and you get exactly what you're expecting? And all of our customers were really great at A, recognizing that we cared enough to admit that we had an issue, and B, that we cared enough to actually make a change. And so that was something that was really positive, and we were able to take that kind of process with some of our key customers and build that out into a game plan of here's the errors, how do we A, fix that, but then also how do we take that same information and get better at it?
Yeah. And that's just a fantastic case. I mean, I'm sure there's some folks on the line with this, Adam, that are like, oh yeah, I maybe have to go to that step. Sometimes you try and find what's the most recent, right? You were talking about, hey, version 2 and version 5. Sometimes that most recent version isn't the right one either. So good that you took some time, and I like that passion that you say you had something to work with, and you were able to really start to understand a little bit further how that can help this whole process too. So yeah, set the scene a little bit. So, talk to us about, your record keeping and documentation. What did this look like and in the current state of affairs at Fresca?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier that there was a lot of computer-based work that were Excel sheets, but what we were trying to do is not just take data. We actually wanted to use the data. And so we were using a lot of paper. There was probably 30 different forms that were done on a piece of paper or done in a spreadsheet where the person on the line was just literally typing things in, but then nothing was ever done with it. We had SQF consultants coming in regularly, and our quality manager was fantastic. She worked hard, she did a lot of things, but her experience with SQF was almost entirely through this auditing body, this group that helped us as a third-party consultant overcome some of our gaps in some of that data. And they helped her kind of grow and learn and understand what she was doing with the paper. And she started to see on her own, hey, there's some gaps here. We're getting this stuff on paper or in a spreadsheet, but we're not using anything. And that's what not only the SQF industry is looking for, but all of the GFSI groups and the FDA, and more importantly, in my opinion, our customers. All of us are looking for, we have data, we use that data. And the challenge we were facing was not only that it was hard to find and gather that data, but ultimately we were having conflicts of the data, and it ultimately cost us money.
Yeah, and that's a big point too. We'll move to this SQF in just a minute because that's important, and I appreciate, Adam, your lean on this, which is let's take care of the customers, right? We know the FDA, SQF, all the GFSI schemes, they're going to get more and more stringent. They're asking and calling on production facilities to provide more data, to be more data centric. You've got the new era of food safety going on right underneath our noses. That's a big thing. These are all important, but that customer takes sort of precedence there, right? So what were some of the forms? Talk us through just maybe a few of the forms, the 30 plus forms. You're obviously doing, it sounded like you're measuring the tortilla, right? So you're doing a quality check on the size of the tortilla. What are some other checks and forms that you were using?
Yeah, so a lot of the forms we do obviously are focused around the quality attributes. So we'll look at pH, we look at moisture, we look at weights, we look at pre-dough temperatures, we look at temperatures after the product gets out of the oven to make sure that it is meeting our minimum safe temperature for food safety. And then we also measure for quality performance the temperature of the product going into the package and also coming out of our freezers. And all those things were separate forms, and they got converted into Excel sheet, which was a huge step forward. But then we still had the issue of actually seeing that data. And ultimately, we did other checks with sanitation. Pre-op checks were done on paper forms. All of our downtime logs are on paper. All of everything we were doing, other than some of those quality checks we converted to an Excel sheet, all those other forms were done on paper.
Yeah. Okay, good. This brings to mind that the adage, of everyone hears, Adam, about actionable data, right? Actionable. What do you do with that? Well, without being able to look at it quickly and indeed in real time, it's really hard to find the right action. Sometimes you want to get to that point in data where you're given the reason to act, not just you can act. You should do this, because if the data schema is set up properly and it follows your processes, you're gonna have that ability to say, oh no, this is a reason we need to do something right now because you saw it right now. So then there was some sign-off process. Talk us through a little bit about the sign-off. There were some things going on that you were thinking could possibly get some disruption in a good way, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were doing our work, not only were these quality checks being done, some of them just didn't have any oversight. And so what was challenging is we have this system in place as a food industry that what you need to do needs to be written down or it never happened. And then also we need to look at what was written and verify, validate that that was accurately contributed to the data set. Otherwise, you need to investigate and find out what was happening and why. Most of the time that was happening, which was great, but because everything was on paper, either it could have been 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later for that sign off to happen. It might not have happened at all, could have been missed, or even worse, it was misplaced because everything's on paper. You have boxes and boxes and boxes. I'm sure everybody has had at least one point in their life where they've just had a whole cabinet full or a whole room full of these filing boxes that you have no idea what's in there. And so it's very frustrating for me coming into it saying, hey, let's look at the data. Let's make sure that we're good to go for our next SQF audit. And then I'm spending 6, 8, 10 hours with our quality team and our production team trying to find records rather than being able to jump right into that data and say, okay, yep, these were validated. My random check of 15 was completed. Everything looked great, and I can move forward. So that sign-off process was a little bit broken because of just the sheer amount of those paper logs that had to be validated and collaborated against, because ultimately there was some of those silos still going on between the production and the quality groups, where even though they're related, we had two separate sign-off systems for very similar documentation.
Yeah, and I've seen some, now I'm not going to say here, I did not see what Fresca's situation was, but we have here at SafetyChain have seen some pretty messy back rooms with boxes and cabinets that look like, oh my gosh, if you needed to go in there and find something, it was, tell your kids, tell your spouse, we'll see you next week, because it's going to take that long to find it. So,
Right.
yeah. So then there was the SQF audit. This was a really interesting point that you brought up, Adam, when we were talking about this. Is it sounded like Fresca outsourced a lot of this early on. I'd love for you to kind of talk through the process of when you kind of showed up and started to look at these things. SQF is a big deal, right? You all have very, very high marks. Take us through the process. You were outsourcing, and then this was one of those things you brought in-house, yeah?
Yeah, so we're using a third-party consultant to first get us SQF certified, which a lot of companies do that, which is totally fine, and it's actually a very great practice, right?
Yep.
But then we kept using them and using them and using them and using them. And while that was good, we could get better. And as we were getting better, we could get greater. And as I looked through the records, talked to our team, and evaluated our strengths and our opportunities to improve, I knew that one thing that we were doing, whether we meant to or not, is we were kind of relying on them as a crutch. And so, figuratively speaking, I kicked the crutch out from underneath us and said, this is what we're going to be doing. And my quality manager is fantastic. She's been here for her whole career, and nothing against her. She just didn't have the experience or the leverage from somebody to help support her in the way I was doing, to be able to get that shift from relying on third party to truly owning it. And that ownership, from what I've seen, when she's taken that, now she's just blossomed into even more than I think she was expecting, and definitely more than I was expecting. And so it was a very positive thing that shifted us from that crutch to being self-sufficient, but also, even more importantly, our team was beginning to feel empowerment, and they were beginning to feel like they could do hard things.
I love that. Yeah, that's a true growth mindset right there, Adam. What you're talking about, your quality manager, where somebody steps in and says, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I can do this. That speaks also to, I think, your leadership style as well. So my sincere congrats on being able to put this together. So you guys had you producing 5 million tortillas a day, but you knew there was another line you guys had to start up. You were going to, you said 5.5 million, right? So
yeah, so we have another line that should actually be here later this month, and then we are already talking about getting an additional new line beyond that for maybe early next year. So we're definitely got a mindset on growth, and part of that growth has to be that empowerment of our team, both on the production side and the quality side, that we can take that new line and mimic or improve on what we've already done.
Yeah, very good. Well, so then you've got, then you enter the marketplace, right? So you're going to say, all right, we're going to grow. We want to keep our quality standards super, super high. We just onboarded and are now doing our own SQFs. And so selection happened. Why was SafetyChain selected over some of these other software providers?
Yeah, so we quickly knew that there was this gap, and we set out to say, here are the things that we must have from whatever that solution looks like. We must have SPC capabilities. We must have OEE capabilities. And ultimately, this has to be unified between our quality group and our operations group. And those are the biggest pieces that we said, these are our needs. Some things we wanted was we need to get away from paper. While that wasn't a quote need, it was definitely one of the top wants that we had.
Mhm.
Second was we wanted to really focus on how can we automate and get data that's more sound, but also more of it, so that we can get a better, truer picture of what was actually happening on that production floor. So as we went through that process of identifying those needs, it quickly weeded out for us a lot of the selection opportunities for different companies and different programs that we were looking at. And so we really quickly narrowed it down and decided that what else do we want? Here's these different programs and different services that meet all of our needs. So let's start looking more at these wants and more at the bigger picture and zooming out just a little bit and saying, what more can we get from this system, seeing as there's more than one option? And that's what really started to set SafetyChain apart from the rest of the group.
Yeah, and it's important to note. We talked about this early on, Adam. You had a absolute laser eye towards automation, automating where you can. So we needed to be able to connect some systems, right? Either with the equipment on the floor, maybe SCADA or PLCs, or just some sensors. We needed to be able to integrate the backside of this and do the analytics layer, right, quickly and easily and accurately. But it also, I mean, at the end of the day, any facility that's doing checks on the floor, there's a bit of manualness to this. We call this human collected data, right? So when you have people collecting data, you need to do, there's some very key points to just make it really simple for them and sort of what we call new proof. Like if you just gave somebody this checklist on a tablet and they just started yesterday, would they be able to work their way through it because of the prompts and because of the way that the form's set up? And so these things that we do to provide the human part of this, good, effective tools to do their job well, also enables that one view of data that everyone now can agree to, because it's very transparent. Everyone can see, oh, that's the check. Oh, I see. That's the data that it goes to. Oh, and here's all the checks for this 2-week period, right? So there's the data automation from the equipment, and then there's, hey, let's get the right data from the humans, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's the biggest piece, is no matter how automated we get or any other company gets, there's always that human capital component that you have to address. Whether you like working with people or you're totally an isolationist and want to work in a silo, ultimately to run a company, you have to have people collateral and you have to have people part of that solution. And
yeah,
that's where that shift comes from. And that's where you start breaking down those silos and really come to that fundamental shift from, this is my role, my job, to start looking over that wall and saying, well, this actually affects this person and this affects that person. And it breaks down that wall as much as you can, and you continue to work on that to create that field of data, that field of work, rather than just that silo of work.
Yep, very good. All right, so SafetyChain, you selected us. Many thanks again. What was the approach when you started thinking, okay, how do we want to put this in? Because the full system that you all for Fresca put together was definitely the quality side, which we have in spades, and the OEE and the SPC side. So those are the three main parts of our solution, with the quality being, you know, hey, all those forms and the SQF audit and all, like there's a lot wrapped up in that QMS. But what was the approach to saying, where do we start and what do we do first across those lines?
Yeah, so we worked with the different groups at Fresca. I think that was the first biggest approach, was saying, how do we start eating this elephant? Because it is way too large to just tackle and just throw the whole thing into our mouths. And so we worked with our internal team, but we also reached out and worked with the team at SafetyChain and talked to them. And it was a very free flow of communication to say, hey, we know we've made this decision. What do we need to do about it? How do we do this? How has it worked best for clients in the past? And how do you see, based on what you know of us, how we can do it? And the thing that really struck me with this is Val and the rest of the team were really great at SafetyChain and talking to us through. We did some video sessions and actually did some videos on the floor to show them, because we implemented all this during COVID, right when it was really at its peak last year. And so the thing that was really impressive to me is our team was very apprehensive at saying, how do we do this if they can't be here? And from a safety standpoint, we knew that the safety chain couldn't come in. We wanted to make sure our employees were safe and that it wasn't that transmission of COVID. But we also knew we needed to do this for our company. And it was really fantastic working with that team, and everybody was on the same page. Everybody was saying, this is what we need to do. This is what we have to do. And we ultimately targeted it saying, we have to look at this and put the whole project together and challenge each other positively, both the safety chain team challenging us challenging ourselves, us challenging safety chain. And it really helped get that blueprint of success laid out in a much better way than if one or two of those parties did all the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we have a process standard here to make sure we understand the true life of a tortilla, in your case, Adam, before we start to apply software to it. And the worst thing you can do is just slap software in without really looking at where processes can get better. Because if you automate a bad process, well, guess what? It's going to be really hard to unwind that. So we do work to do a blueprinting process with you. And yeah, during COVID, this was not the easiest thing. We listen, Adam, on our side, we were figuring it out too, right? We have a team incredibly passionate about what we're doing, and figuring this out along with your team was fantastic. So we challenged some assumptions along the way. Did we just, Adam, did we just go in and say, hey, this is exactly how it's going to work? We're gonna install this, and then we're gonna get out of your hair? Or what was that? What was it like?
Yeah, that is exactly what happened. Just kidding. No, we really actually it was really good. We worked with the different team members at SafetyChain and internally, and it was very, very, very collaborative. That being said, there were pushes, but in very good ways. It was, hey, here's our timeline. And sometimes it was us talking to SafetyChain, sometimes it was SafetyChain talking to us. And we were saying, hey, what do we need to push? What do we need to maybe shift our resources to make sure that that timeline or that implementation step or that question that we have gets completed and answered? And so it wasn't pushed on us as a project saying, hey, go do everything on your own. There was collaboration and working together to find out what is the right way to go about this. And then that positive pressure on both sides saying, hey, this is a gap. Here's an opportunity for us to change course or adjust course. And that was really, really good for us. And also challenged our current data collection. We looked at our data one way prior to this SafetyChain implementation. And then during the course of implementation, we started saying, well, why are we doing that? Does that even make sense to continue to do? And if so, is there a better way to do it? And there was very good communication and collaboration where we challenged ourselves, or we asked SafetyChain and said, hey, we've been talking about this. What if we did it this way? Can you make that work? And I think that's where a lot of the really good positive changes happened, is when we were open with each other on both problems and solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the part about this implementation process that is very unique. You use, I think Fresca, Adam, you guys use this as a really true opportunity to get not just software, right? It was, let's get really good at what we're doing. Let's give ourselves the right tools. Let's make sure that the process is great, and then keep focusing on that quality while knowing, hey, we've got yields, we've got these productivity goals to hit. So, and so that was fantastic. All through COVID, one more time, again. So
definitely a challenge.
Yeah, it's just never-ending challenges. So talk to us a little bit, Adam, about you saw some differences in shifts then when we started operating the SPC data. Walk us through what you saw and what you did on your side.
Yeah, so even when we first started just testing SafetyChain out on the lines, we started doing some stuff at night and at daytime. And we were seeing, because we worked 2 12-hour shifts, and we were seeing the night shift and the day shift weren't quite lining up the way that we would have expected to. Obviously, there's differences in people running equipment, and there's some expected differences there. But as we were looking at it, we were noticing that there were different perspectives as to what we were actually trying to accomplish with the form or a task versus what we were actually getting. And working with our night shift, that started to create more of those challenges internally in a good way, where we could say, well, this is what we were expecting. Why are you doing it this way? And then they would then come back and say, well, that just doesn't make sense. We don't have as many management people on the floor. And so we have to adjust the way we're thinking in this way. And so it really helped us overcome some of those things, and ultimately made our day shift managers have less of that kind of daily task list thing and push a little bit more to stepping backwards and saying, what else is something I can focus on and have better use of my time?
That's fantastic. Yeah, we often run into a lot of tribal knowledge upon these implementations, and that growth mindset I was talking about earlier, your team, your passion there, that really helped us to overcome some of these things more difficultly, because we weren't focusing on, hey, so and so was doing something such and such, right? It was more like, hey, this process that we have is suboptimal. Hey, what do we do? Let's work on the process so that when the software kicks in, when we're putting this stuff in and we're automating and getting the human collected data together, it works better. So it was fantastic. A true partnership indeed. So, before I go on to the benefits and impact, you had a story, Adam, about an R&D request. Can you walk us through that? That was kind of an interesting sort of side case where you saw a lot of benefit from this, right?
Yeah, so about the same time, we were just finishing up getting this project started with one of our customers, where they needed their tortilla to be specific nutrients, specific product performance, etc. And so we developed this product with them, and it worked really well. Everything was going positively. But then during the course of our launching, we started going through this process of, what do those ranges need to be? What do those components that are really important to this new tortilla we've developed for you, what do those actually have to look like in practice? And so as we started talking to them, they ultimately said, here's the set of requirements that we're needing. Thank you for asking us about it. We're really glad, just because you're asking the question, we have confidence you're going to be able to pull this off. And so I take that information back to my team and I said, I don't think we have the right tests. We don't have the right data to be able to ensure that we're doing this time and time again. We're going to be able to do a good job, but we need to do a great job at this. And we were looking at that at the same time as implementing this, and I knew right away that this is going to be that tool that will help us ensure that every tortilla that gets to that customer is what they were expecting. And the big piece that I shared with my team and with our customer is that the quality doesn't stop at the tortilla. At the end of the day, if that customer's finished product that uses our tortilla does not perform well, or the customer doesn't like it, then our tortilla's failed. And so we have to look at it beyond just what our product is in the process, but ultimately to the person that's spending their hard-earned dollars to purchase that food item. And that means that you're not going to be eating just a tortilla. There's very few people, unfortunately, that just eat tortillas. Everybody puts something inside, and our tortilla has to work with whatever that something is.
Oh, that's too funny. I'll be honest though, there is something that will absolutely ruin a meal for me if it's a burrito, and it's if it cracks, right? And then I started at the one side of the burrito, and the crack happened at the other side, and now I got everything dumping out the bottom. So
lettuce and meat and olives and juice,
yep.
And you're trying to use a fork now that you didn't plan on. Exactly, it's a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny, and I think a lot of people on the line today could probably share that that frustration. So when you talk about product performance, especially like R&D, like, hey, when you got a customer and they've got something new, you were able to use the flexibility that SafetyChain offers you. You didn't have to like come to us. Were you able to put together a new form? How did you approach that new request from that customer?
So we took that request and said, look, this is what we were planning on doing with SafetyChain. And it reinforced a lot of those things, but then it also created new questions. And so we were able to not only improve our processes and our forms that we were looking at in SafetyChain, but it also changed our whole process for our other customers to make it better for them too. So I think the mistake a lot of us do is we take one learning from one experience and we keep it tied to that one experience versus taking a step back and examining that learning and saying, can I apply this to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or the entire process I have? And that's the piece that experience shared with us was a good learning experience for my team, is we're able to say, look, here's one request from one customer that we think is valid. Why don't we do this for everybody? It doesn't take much more time. All it's doing is we're tweaking our form in this way to result in better data and better systems and better checks, a better product to the customer.
Yep, exactly. And I'll just kind of answer the burning question here. Someone did type in, did you have to go to SafetyChain to get support for that form? It's either way. We've got support for you when you need it, but the true power in SafetyChain is that we want our customers to own, operate, and use it. You can go open up a form, edit it, make sure it works. You can test it out first. You can share it with certain people, make sure it's still working for them, right? If you wanted, you could even share that with a customer to let them know, to improve that confidence factor, to say, hey, listen, this is how we're going to change that check to make sure that we're getting that new spec or that new product that you want. So thanks for that question. I appreciate that. We'll save some more for the end, of course. So about benefits and impact, some more stuff here, Adam. So we're talking about this unification, right? And this is, we're not overstating it. Production in general, in our experience, Adam, has definitely the lion's share of attention and definitely corporate expenditures, CapEx, stuff like that. They've got to buy equipment. But then the quality team, I mean, Fresca is quality driven. Like that's your mantra almost, So how did the production quality teams unite under this centralized data? We're talking about, hey, we don't believe it, now we do. How did some of these things come together?
Yeah, so just a quick plug for the quality groups out there. Your quality team is a investment in an insurance, right? If you own a house, one of your biggest bills next to your house itself is the insurance on that home. And that's where quality groups really fit in the bucket of expenses. But through that process of implementing SafetyChain, it forced us to collaborate as a group, both before implementation and during implementation. And that collaboration forced engagement by the different functions, because now suddenly, well, this is a quality program. Well, no, this is a Fresca program, and you as a production person, and you as a maintenance person, and you as a purchasing person are all part of this project. And if we fail, that's okay, but we're all failing. Or if we win, then we've all won. And so that really forced a lot of that engagement from the team, but it also forced a lot of the successes and forced a lot of those tough communications between the group. And every person through that process now started to take the data and information that we were getting out of SafetyChain, and it became just data. It wasn't quality data anymore. It wasn't production data anymore. It was just pure and simply data that I can trust is accurate, and that we can then take that source and not worry about it, because it was in that database and it's in a format we've all agreed to. We're all going to just inherently trust the data, where in the past, there was not a lot of that trust, and it created wasted time and wasted resources trying to revalidate data that was already in existence. And that really breaks down those silos and barriers and improves what we're doing based on that data that we can now trust.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that some of the benefits and impact, obviously, it was interesting. You said this, Adam, at the beginning. You said, taking paper out of the equation wasn't necessarily the first and foremost thing you wanted, but it happened, right? Zero paper is now used in the quality side. Is that still that's still the case, correct?
Yeah, and we're constantly adding more production things into SafetyChain to get those papers off. And we even challenged our accounting team and our safety department and said, hey, anything you guys have that's paper, come talk to us and we'll find a way to put it into SafetyChain so it's all digitized.
Yeah, it's really powerful. We've had really great stories coming from other customers, especially through COVID. They started using SafetyChain because of the flexibility, right? To do these checks, digitize it, make it data, and then, hey, now you've got SPC right built in, right? So a lot of EHS stuff, right? Accounting, I'll be really interested in hearing down, maybe a year from now, getting an update from you, Adam, on what they thought of could be used, because that's really when you start to connect the cost of quality to your CFO's office. That's when, I don't mean to say this haphazardly, but you do get a bit of power when that happens, when you can show the CFO's office, hey, this is what's happening, this is what we did, and we just saved $22,000 a year, right? So data collection was real time, right? You had mentioned, Adam, it took some time before to take a look at that SPC stuff. You were getting it manually, you're getting it into a spreadsheet, so there's probably maybe some errors there, right? But then you'd have to do some data crunching, and that took some more time. How long did it take you to get a sense of SPC data before SafetyChain?
Yeah, so just transposing that data without any fact checking, without any data validation, none of that was included. Just transposing was 20 hours a week. And that was everything from our QA lead to our QA manager taking time. And so if it was just our QA lead doing it, we would be saving $22,000 a year by her not doing that anymore. Then once you start adding in the time that was spent when there was maybe a concern or a question to validate the data, to make sure that it was accurate, to really dive deep into some of the numbers, there were times where it would be a 30, 40 hour per week job looking at data.
That's tough. That's a lot of time that could be spent perfecting some recipes, or maybe doing some more checks. That's when you start to near a full-time position for things. That's, I think, when I recommend other prospects, customers of SafetyChain to say, okay, now really make sure that's what you want. Do you want a head count, or do you want to automate some stuff and look into some things that give a better tool to the existing folks that are already there to make shorter work of that? So that's fantastic. Do you talk about this continuous improvement cycle too? Walk us through how QA helps the line be more productive, and then vice versa, right? We're starting to get this unification. You got the production team, you got the quality team. How are they working together differently?
Yeah, so I think the big thing here with that continuous improvement cycle, and where SafetyChain really helped us better identify where our opportunities were, is now quality groups and others could look at that data real time and say, something's not right here. And we've been able to start talking to the groups and opening that doorway of communication between production and quality, where we're having conversations minutes to hours later when there was an issue or where there was a concern, versus 2 to 3 weeks. And so we're finding more opportunities to talk and collaborate. And ultimately, we're seeing fewer and fewer complaints. We're seeing fewer and fewer concerns in our quality testing, in-house and external with third parties. And so we're getting more of that improvement process. And funny enough, even though we saved money by not having our lead QA person putting SPC data into the charts, we're identifying more and more opportunities to improve. And at the beginning of this year, we actually hired a continuous improvement person, because we're seeing that there's a lot more opportunity, not only to get better, but also to identify savings in our processes. And so that continuous improvement cycle has, even though we've only been live with SafetyChain for a little over a year now, we've actually fundamentally shifted and said, well, let's actually apply more resources to this continuous improvement thing. And let's start actually having more line of sight to where those opportunities might be.
That's amazing. Now I'm going to restate that just to be crystal clear for everybody. You're saying that the software purchase actually opened up so many opportunities for improvement, and you were able to see things clearly in some respects for the first time in this way, that it led to an added investment of an individual to actually say, let's make this a center of excellence almost for Fresca, right? That continuous improvement. Is that right?
That's right. We're not perfect. We're not where we need to be, but we're recognizing opportunities to improve and we're acting on them.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is something else. So tell me about a time, if you would, Adam, that you were able to. We talk about this real-time decision making because of real-time data, right? And sometimes that's kind of murky. Like for your layman on the phone with us today and watching us, can you give us an example of when you were able to make that decision better in real time using that data?
Yeah. So obviously there's those daily tasks where I'm looking at the data and my weight is 2 ounces heavier than it should be, right? And those are kind of common occurrences. But one time in the last few months, we actually had a complaint while we were on a phone call with one of our customers, and this individual said that, hey, by the way, while we're on the phone, there was this tortilla issue that we had where the tortillas were too small, and they were pretty significantly smaller, like by an inch. What's going on? What's happening? And I was able to talk to them on the phone real time, and they were able to give me the date on the bag. And I looked it up and I said, well, on that date, we did make the product, so that's great. But I shared my screen with them on Link, which is SafetyChain's kind of data portal, if you will, and was able to show them real time, here's that production day that you just identified for this product, and here's all of our quality checks with diameter or size being that metric that you're complaining about and that you have a concern on. And I'm not seeing anything even remotely close to what it is you're telling me. I'm not saying that you're wrong or right or whatever, but is there any way we could dig into this a little deeper and get us some more information? And the next day, it turned out that their distributor partner that they utilized actually had subbed in somebody else's product. And the complaint they had was actually for something that wasn't even ours. And so it actually strengthened our relationship with them, where they said, wow, this is great. I didn't realize you had this tool at your disposal. This is fantastic. I'm so glad that we're using you guys as a tortilla supplier rather than this other company.
Think of all of the hassle that just saved, Adam, from you having to call and get it and so think of the boxes of paper, right? If you would have to go and figure out what happened because you've got a customer complaint you got to deal with. There is no doubt about that, right? Now you hear it. One, you can challenge it because you have accurate data. Oh no, it looks like was there a lot code they gave you or something too? Maybe.
Yep. So they give us the lot code and date. We were able to narrow it down really quickly.
Yeah, that's the fantastic part. I mean, you're able to kind of, because of how the actual software architecture that SafetyChain has, it's a platform. It's not just kind of this point solution or an iOS app. It's a full solution, right? You're able to actually go and search for that lot code, pull it up. You've got the information in front of you. I love that you shared that with your customer, though. That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So there's another story I'd love for you to tell for us, because again, it does it does outline the extensibility of the software itself, but the robustness as well. You have, as in many food preparation facilities, you have a waste and rework battle that you fight daily, right? Like there's always something that can still go on. And you talked about this battle. How did this waste and rework? Can you give me that example you gave us where you were able to say, okay, this is actually going to turn itself on its head? The production team was like, wait, what? And I think it speaks really well to the unification between that quality team and production.
Yeah, so we have a series of cooling belts and towers, and we have this vision system right after that cooling process that'll kick off tortillas that are undersized or irregularly shaped, or has a hole in it, or has a straight edge, so it's not round. So it'll kick all this stuff off into a rework bucket that then we can take and then grind it up, put it at a small percentage into the next batch to reutilize that product. As long as it's the same production run and same lot code, it can go in the same product. And we do this, we've done this for years, and within, just recently, we had a higher than normal metal detector reject count. And as in our investigation process, we found out that it was actually coming from the regrind. And so we looked at all this data, we put it all together, and it only took like 5 minutes, which was great. But we shared that data with our production team and said, based on what we're seeing, we need to stop regrinding until we fix the root cause of the problem. And I was expecting this long, drawn-out battle between the two groups and having back and forth for like 3 days. But it was literally, I explained the problem, showed the data, and they said, well, this is going to hurt, but totally understand. And it was a 10-minute conversation.
So this is important. This could be, Adam, the most crystal clear example of how you can unite the production and quality teams into being able to be a cohesive unit, making the right decisions. Sometimes it's going to hurt one person or one group over the other, but they see it for what it really is.
So and the great thing is it takes that question of validity of that data and makes that a moot point. And that's where I was expecting the concerns. But because we had all worked on this project together, we had all implemented the system together, there was that trust built up that any data from this is going to be accurate. And now the conversation was no longer a, well, how do you know that's right? It was a, okay, how do we fix this?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there's always that, the rework and waste. There's you told me the story and I was like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought of the metal detector, right? So that's interesting that you were able to kind of put that all together. Now this is, it all adds up, and I'm just going to kind of go here right before I see some questions coming in, so we'll get to those in a second. Listen, Adam, your team, the production team there, you've been fantastic to work with, obviously, but earlier this year, you guys were awarded the Plant Management Championship for our customers. And that's, in general, for just making a big impact on productivity, profitability, and compliance, keeping all of those things together. So I hope you have you proudly are displaying that award somewhere in your office or somewhere on the facility, because you guys certainly earned it.
Well, thank you. Like I said before, this is, for me, not something that I'm alone in taking and accepting. Our team has done tons of work to make this happen. We're not ever going to be finished with this project of making sure SafetyChain is utilized to the best of its abilities. And I can tell you, your team is going to get probably 10 more times work that you guys planned on, because we're going to continue to push the limits of it and make this even better for us.
We want that. We welcome that, because we know that there's places where we can, because of the architecture of the SafetyChain software platform, we're able to do some things that nobody else can, right? And we want to fill those gaps. We want to show that value to you guys. So we encourage our customers to push us for sure. So, well, I've got 2 questions on deck, and we're just going to call it out. If anyone else has a couple of questions, now is the time, type them in. I'm going to get to those now. Josh asked this interesting question. I'm going to sort of pull it apart for us to tackle. I'm going to take part of it, Adam, and then I'm going to ask you to take the second part. So Josh is asking, who looks at the data now? And he has another sentence that basically wanted to kind of understand their limitations to it, right? So I'm going to take the first part. I'm going to say, functionally, the data and the reporting is all permission-based. If there's a group or some people that you don't want looking at OEE data because it's just not it's not in their wheelhouse, they won't see that by virtue of them logging into the software. So there's controls and permission sets that allow you to determine who sees what. Now, beyond that, he is asking a pretty good question. Who's looking at the OEE data? Who's looking at SP data? Who's looking at the quality data? And who's using it daily?
Yeah, so on our end, to Aaron's point, it's controlled by who you set the access to. And for us, we have our quality team with full access to look at that data, and we have management able to add more data and to do those validation checks. And then on the production side, they have very, very similar access to the quality team. So we have not distinguished between quality and operations on who can look at what. because we wanted to continue to create that fostered environment of creativity and collaboration.
Yeah, and that's important. The transparency is key. That's going to really unlock a lot of the continuous improvement stuff for one. But then just being able to know confidently that you have everything in place. I'm going to ask you a personal question, Adam. Are you ever using it on your phone? Do you ever get to vacation and maybe think, oh, I wonder how the production's doing, and you pull it up real quick? Do you look at it wherever you are, whenever you want?
I do have the app on my phone. I get in there probably 2 or 3 times a week after hours, just to kind of look at it, especially if I know we're running maybe a more difficult product, or we're running something on the line that might have had some challenges over the last week or so I can kind of get an idea of what's happening. Thank goodness, most of the time it's not an issue, and it only takes me 30 seconds, but there has been a couple times where there's a question of, hey, I got this question. I can shoot a text message to our night team and say, what's going on? And so that's been really positive. Instead of waking up in the morning and saying, well, something happened at 7 p.m. last night and nobody addressed it, I can say, yeah, we actually saw that, we addressed it, and it was taken care of before the end of the night.
Yep. Yeah, one of the important parts that we didn't really touch on the feature functionality of it is that, you know, you can dictate if somebody needs to put in a note, right, to say, hey, maybe a check went bad or something happened, right, that wasn't expected. You can put that, either the person that's doing the sign-off process put in a note, or the inspector, or the person actually on the floor doing the check. You can actually say, hey, it looks like this happened. I saw a tortilla on the ground, but it was this, and we did this. That oftentimes eliminates a huge stress. And we hear it often, Adam, it's in that morning phase where it's like, okay, what just happened overnight? People kind of come in, production and stuff. So good stuff. All right, one more question, and then if anyone else has any in the meantime, we'll wrap it up. But what Carol asked, what an example of an SPC data is. She's wondering, you know, what are the different checks and forms that you guys are using? Just kind of rattle some of. We heard metal detection, right? Was that on? Are you throwing that against SPC?
That one we don't have as SPC because it's a pass-fail type test.
Oh, true.
But for SPC that we utilize it most on, we're using it for anything that has a measurable range. So diameters, weights, pH, moisture content. I think those are the big 4 that we're using SPC on right now. We are constantly looking and seeing what more can you do. One thing we just started using in the last few weeks was actually email notifications for when something was out of tolerance in the SPC range. And so basically what that's done for us, even though we've only been using that feature for a limited amount of time, is it creates that level of awareness that on the floor, yes, I'm going to put in my information and I'm going to take resolution because it's out of spec. Now I know my management's seeing it real time without even having to log into SafetyChain or the app. They have an email on their phone at the exact same time I push submit, and they're going to follow up with me in the next 5-10 minutes anyway. And so it's helped create even more transparency and more real-time reaction when there are concerns identified.
That's fantastic. And somebody just popped in that question, which is who's sending that email? And so it's dual. In your situation here, Adam, first of all, you can set alerts and notifications if something hits. Are you doing that on a run rule thing, or if one thing hits outside of spec? What's your and you
right
can do
now we're utilizing it with a single data point out of spec because we wanted to test it and see what way worked best, but also to make sure that we're all paying hyper-focused attention to what's happening on the floor.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, and that was you can, if needed, as warranted, really take it back one step and just hit that alert or that notification if a run rule gets hit, one of the 9. So that's again part of the feature functionality set. So we have one more question. I'm going to kind of just take it to wrap us up. We're kind of up against the clock, Adam, but I wanted to take this. How does reporting work? So that's a pretty broad sort of thing. First of all, two types of things you can do. This ad hoc reporting what you heard Adam talk about when he was on the phone with the customer and he went and looked up something, you can run ad hoc reporting whenever you want to show, hey, let me see the last 2 weeks, let me see the last month, let me just show today's, so you can kind of develop reports to understand on any of those checks like he was talking about, measuring diameter, weight, pH, temperature, all that stuff. Or what you can also do is build dashboards that show you things. So you don't, generally speaking, if you're running reports, our users are telling us they're doing it because they need to go find what just happened and how to fix it. The dashboards are that extra layer of, okay, now that we've got all these checks going, we can just live monitor this stuff as it's going on, so that it doesn't, so you can at a glance go and say, hey, I'm going to build myself a dashboard to really see how everything's going. So I hope I did that some justice. Adam, is that how Fresca is using the reporting and dashboarding?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're working on, and there's opportunities for us to 10x and get better, but that's exactly how we're using it.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, well, that's it for us and Fresca today, but I know we're anxious to hear more about what you guys are cooking up, Adam, and we're happy to be a part of the extended team for you to succeed here. Some of you probably been wondering what the C-suite is. You know, the C-suite, what we've coined is really our initiative to help evolve and extend modern plant capabilities through this real-time operational visibility. It's a very, very powerful thing. When you take human collected data, map it with those machines, the sensors and the SCADA and the PLC, and you put it together, it forms a holistic picture of what's really going on. And the goal there is to provide objective insight to accelerate that journey of understanding how you can get better and do that 10x. So that's it for us, Adam. So thank you so much. I'm going to look forward to, I'm going to try and get out and visit your facility at some point and meet you and the team. Really looking forward to that, but appreciate you taking some time today with us and after the holiday week, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks again for joining us, Adam.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right. And that'll wrap it up. We'll see you next time. Thank you.